What is the condition of us as a species? How do we reconcile self-interest with massive inequality? I think that it's really important for all of us to realise that we can't go on with business as usual. It's been said many times, we make a world, but then that world makes us. This is our condition. We are embedded in and determined by our context. The greater responsibility of the art of our time to somehow reflect on and provide instruments for examination and self-awareness. I mean, this is an extraordinary thing about our nature. We have always broken our own boundaries. These concerns have been in the work from the very, very beginning. Sleeping Place was the first work that I recognised, having come back from India, having seen people sleeping on the street, to works like Man Asleep, a lying body form in lead with a series of very crude walking terracottas, right through to Another Place. I think that concern with facing the fact that migration has been an essential part of the hominin story. This work is a reflection of the fact that by the middle of this century, 80% of us will be living in the urban grid. We are no longer hunter-gatherers living in the forest. In fact, the forest is disappearing fast. So how can you think of making a rendition of the collective body? The idea that somehow the progress of humanity was towards the city-state. I think this is a reflection on our condition of being urban animals. When you come into Resting Place, you could take it as a builder's yard, and then maybe you'll recognise that they look perhaps a bit like buildings, but then as you walk through them and amongst them, you may begin to be able to discern that they are bodies at rest. The same set of bricks has been used to make around 250 absolutely unique forms, just by the way that they are assembled. You know, you've just got this chaotic, but somehow not so chaotic, orthogonal organisation of blocks of various sizes. The processing of the clay is really important. The clay is dug out from a valley bottom in Gloucestershire that was deposited between 350 and 140 million years ago, and in its stratification holds time. But the extraordinary thing is that history is disturbed. We grab it with great big machines, and then we grind, we smash, we pug, and then extrude this completely mechanically processed substance. There is a huge difference between, as it were, this compacted substance and what we are using to make Resting Place. This is hand-thrown clay that comes off the pugging mill and is used as it comes, very light, very loose, very moist, and is not compacted and can be thrown into a box. He then hits the box down hard against the moulding bench, scrapes off the top, and then releases very carefully the block from the wooden mould. When the bricks are dried, they are then transferred to the kilns themselves, with enough space between every brick to allow the heat to penetrate absolutely everywhere and the fire to do its work. The clay or the blocks of resting place have accepted their destiny to be like a brick, but have actually escaped from it in a sense, because none of them are standard. So all of these sizes are very particular. And in that sense, resting place is very different from the liberation of the clay that is in the field works. A brick is only of value because it's like another brick, and every single figure within field is unique, touched by the individual hand and gestures of a particular person. With resting place, I'm playing another game about self and other, part, whole, while using the language of the built environment, using the language of the world that asks us to conform to it. As bricked and fired earth has been with us for a very, very long time, so has iron. We categorize the eras of human evolution in terms of Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. The core of this planet is molten iron. We depend on its magnetic field. On the other side, I think it's a recognition of the Industrial Revolution. Even though we're in the information age, we are still utterly rooted in all of the principles of the Industrial Revolution. The works that we call weave works, they are a cast version of a matrix that is made of XYZ coordinates that are capable of mapping space in 3 dimensions. These are human spaces in space, defined by a mapping made of quite tightly interleaved, woven rods that are 20 millimeters square that pass through the volume of the body. We have a radical new form of making cast works. Lost wax has been part of bronze casting for thousands of years, but we are using polystyrene to make lost foam. This allows us to make more complex castings than could ever be made by a lost wax process, simply because you couldn't do the weave works were it not possible to use the self-organizing principles of sand when vibrated. To cast a work, you have to smelt a ton of metal. The iron that we use comes from recycled steel, from the brake discs of trucks and cars, and we melt them down. And that goes into a large reservoir at the top, which is then connected to a main feed and then comes up to feed multiple feeds into the work itself. The metal is poured in at 1400 degrees. It vaporizes the polystyrene and then replaces it with iron. So this is an extraordinary transmutation from the lightest material to a solid mass of this concentrated earth material. We have evolved this technique over the last 8 years, since taking over the foundry as the primary method that we use to make work. I have enormous respect for the incredible team of fettlers that work with us at Hexham. Fettlers have to grind off all of that feeding without damaging the work, and it's a massive job. The weaves are skeletons of the underpinning of our architectural context, now brought to confront it. So all of them are in contact with the walls, the floor, and the pillars that hold that building together, in order to question and recognise that we are conditioned by the world that we have made. They make you aware of your own position of being contained by these spaces. It's really important that we use the methods and engineering that exists within the public realm to make imaginative objects. So the big beamer uses exactly the same dialogue between three coordinates, but now at scale. So we've made this using gas cut corten. It's 115 mil square beams that have then been milled and bolted together with interleaf plates. It's an incredible job that the team at Rolfing have done. This is an audit of us now. This is the world that we live in. These are the materials and the means of manufacture that we are dependent upon. There is, I think, both the sense of absolute determination of a very robust engineering, but at the same time an acknowledgement of jeopardy, of its ability to fall. What are they, these objects? In a sense, they are both using and questioning the language of monumentality. But what is a monument? A monument on the whole has to do with memorial, has to do with thinking about past events. The angel was saying, here we are at the cusp between the industrial and the information ages. Can we use these materials to make an object that talks about continuity? And I think this large beamer work is about, in a way, looking out to the horizon and beyond the horizon as being about the future. This is not memorializing anything. In reassessing the language of the statue, I am questioning the right of the statue both to stand and to stand for anything. Is a refuge a prison? Is a sanctuary a cell? Those concrete works are a continuation of both the early concrete works, which were blocks with void body forms inside, and allotment, which was another attempt, rather like Sleeping Field, of attending to the collective body. They're a question about identity, a question about where we belong, but also a recognition that the darkness of the body is where we truly belong, in this place that has no objects, has no edge, and seems capable of infinite extension. I think the mouth, for me, yes, it's an aperture that gives us access to this dark interior, but it's also the point of communication, of contact. We could take all of these bunkers as being, in a way, an emanation of both the selfishness of liberal economics. But I think you could also say that, for me, this is a vehicle for expressing the fact that freedom, perhaps, in the end, has to be imaginative freedom. And that only happens with a certain degree of stillness. It is only through stilling motion. It is only through accepting our condition of embodied time that we can become truly free. So all of these bunker works are really about that extraordinary paradox that the mind can only be free if we still the body. Here we've got 5 high tensile lines in space, but they've now been made to carry the mapping of a body. This work is rich with paradox. You could think of it as a crucifixion. I say it a lot, that the cross was in the body a long time before anybody was nailed to a cross. The relationship between sexuality and intelligence and our ability in our extended limbs to embrace space. In no other work is the acceptance of having made a world that the world makes us more clearly materialized. The rules of verticality and horizontality that exist within the context of that room have now been applied to the body, in which insides and outsides are annihilated. We are becoming aware of our own freedoms, of our own movement, of our own trajectory through space and time. Things, objects, they are of only any use at all once completed by the attention of the viewer. All of these works resolutely exist on shared ground, and the viewer and the work have to work together in order for anything to be produced. Sculpture is an extraordinary thing, it's still silent things in a world full of things, but if they work, their stillness and silence can provoke our movement. I would like to feel that as the work has become increasingly geometric, increasingly abstract, and increasingly essentialized, that actually its ability to be a vessel, a holding for your projected emotions, your empathy, you'll be able to project onto that space your own embodied memory